You're listening to Shoe In, covering the ins and outs of all things footwear, from sneakers to heels, loafers to slippers, and every type of shoe in between. Brought to you by the FDRA, the Footwear Industries Association focused on retail, trade, politics, and fashion, helping create and enhance conversations on all things footwear. And now your footwear insiders, Matt Priest and Andy Polk.
Welcome back to Shoe Radio.
Is that your radio voice?
WSHOE, Shoe. We're talking shoes 24/7 with hits in between.
What are the hits?
Classics.
Like what?
Smashing Pumpkins, Led Zeppelin, Tupac.
I thought you meant like songs with shoe references.
No.
We've already done that podcast.
Our advertisers won't give us any money for those.
No.
Oh, folks, welcome back. You know you love us. We hope you do at least.
It's an acquired taste.
Our numbers haven't gone down. Now that may be the bots.
True.
That may be the bots that we're playing to get us to jump. But we're glad you're back with us. We're back in studio. And this month actually is designated, even if you're listening far off in advance, because you're going back into our catalog to listen to things in the past. This is kind of past and present, like Back to the Future.
It is, man.
If you're Biff and you're going back and you're trying to use a sports book to bet properly, and let's not get down that rabbit hole. I'm gonna stop myself
that movie.
right there.
It's a great movie.
But this month, July 2019 is Footwear Sustainability Month, and there you go. And we know it is because we actually declared it so. But we declared it because it gives us focus at FDRA to really work on sustainability issues and have conversations around that, help spread best practices, and create resources and programs for the industry. Because what we have seen is there's a lot of people doing a lot of great things. But it does cost money, and if we could all work together on certain things and work collectively, it reduces the amount of cost, and it can increase the amount of effect for positively for our environment and our factories, and just in general, just being more sustainable is always a positive thing. I think
it is a positive thing, and I think. To your point, Andy, we're also in the process of rolling out a program, a shoe waste program with our factories in China. We're going to do a pilot program in China. We've just inked the deal with Elevate, and we're going to be kind of walking through that with our factory groups to try to eliminate waste in production.
Awesome.
So
I think we'll go in deep on that on another podcast.
We will.
That's coming up.
We will.
People I know are on the edge of their seat waiting to hear more, but I'm going to stop you right there.
Please hold me back.
That's right. I'm going to bury the lead on that one.
All right, good.
We'll come back to it. But today, what we think is super important is not just how we look at sustainability as we design, develop, produce, et cetera, but it's also who's consuming it and how they view sustainability, right? How we bridge the gap between sustainable practices and meet and match what consumers are thinking in terms of sustainability and increasingly demand from brands on sustainability and environmentally friendly materials and products. And so I'm really happy to bring in our good friend Beth Goldstein with the NPD Group. The NPD Group has recently done a study on consumers and what they're saying about sustainability.
Awesome.
And hugely important to our industry to understand that.
So timely.
So Beth, welcome back to the show.
Hey guys, thanks for having me again.
Absolutely. So Beth was on about a year ago, I guess, and
Few the proud, the return guest.
She's been hiding from our hardball questions.
She has been.
She knows we're the toughest journalists in footwear.
I know, but her handlers finally agreed with our terms, and she's come back on.
I think there was a lot of muzzling of me. I think the terms were basically like, she's happy with Matt, she loves Jasmine, Andy can't talk during this segment. So
what are we gonna do?
I guess you'll just take the lead, Matt. Go right ahead.
Let's do it. That's what I'm here for. So Beth, thanks for coming on. We appreciate it as always. And the thing I love about NPD Group is that you guys can pivot and do kind of unique things that aren't just sales data, and you do all that stuff, and we know that point of sale data and all kinds of analysis. But if we came together and we decided we want to do a project on sustainability, and so we are working on our side on the industry point of it, but you have the direct access to the consumer, and so you went out and you started talking to your consumers about footwear consumers about sustainability and sustainable product. And before we dive in, what are some of like the high points that you want to highlight so that we can kind of think more critically about how consumers approach sustainable product?
Sure. Great. That was a great intro. Thanks very much. This was very interesting. It was a great idea, and I think it worked well. We kind of both came at it at different angles. So, we have a large consumer panel that we can go back to and ask questions to, and we also leveraged our partner, Polo Company Civic Science, to ask a couple of questions as well. So we've got a nice mix here. What we saw across the board. And maybe this won't be surprising, but I think there are some, when we get into the details, there might be a few nuances. But, sustainability really is a new way of life, particularly for younger consumers. So the age group that, aligns kind of with the census age group is the 18 to 34. So if we break that down, it's really kind of the older Gen Z and, most of the millennial generation. So it's these younger consumers that, really over-index pretty much on everything we asked about, concern about sustainability and other social issues, any willingness to pay more, awareness of materials and brands that are out there. So probably not surprising, but I think it's significant because that really shows that, as these consumers get older and, really right now they actually do represent the largest spending power, that's very influential because they're going to be driving what brands and retailers decide to do based on what they're demanding of the things they're buying. Another thing is that we'll talk about this in more detail, but it's okay to charge a little bit of a premium. Pretty much no one said that they're willing to pay a lot more for sustainability, but there was some willingness to pay a little more. And I think we definitely see that more education is needed because even though we, among ourselves in the industry, we're talking about the brands and the new materials that are out there and, some of the brands, particularly the bigger ones that have made some waves like, Allbirds, Rothy's, awareness is actually pretty low across the board out there. So I think there's just, more education and marketing and all of that. And then, while consumers are concerned about what's in their actual product and whether it's eco-friendly, sustainable materials, it's also a little bit more broader than that. So, working conditions, environmental causes, you mentioned reducing waste before. So those are all ways to, participate, in the sustainability movement as well. So those are really the four main general conclusions that we found. But obviously, we've got some detail on each.
Yeah, so I think we've got 5 key areas we'll focus on today from what we've discussed, and I think the first point that comes up from your survey when you were asking the question was, when considering footwear purchases, how important are eco-friendly / sustainable materials for you? So it's a great question because I think more and more consumers are very aware of the materials in the shoes because of comfort levels, breathability, functionality issues, things like that. So they're typically very aware and look at those things to see if they mesh with what they have from the past and what they're expecting it to do in terms of performance. So what did you guys find? What were consumers' key importance placed on eco-friendly materials?
Sure. This is a question we actually have asked twice. So we actually, I think it was even before we started talking about it, we had put it out there last summer. And then once we started talking, it was maybe 6-7 months later. And so we said, let's ask this question again and see if anything has changed. So essentially 40% of consumers told us that eco-friendly or sustainable materials are either very important, that was about 10% of consumers, or somewhat important, which is about 30%. And that overall didn't change much since last summer when we asked it again this past January. So not totally surprising. Sometimes consumer metrics like this, in a period of 6-7 months, aren't going to change much. But what we did notice is that there was a significant increase in the percentage of the, older Gen Z, the millennials, that answered very important. So it was 10% last June, and now it was 17% in January. And that actually registered, when you do the testing on it, as statistically significant. So, it does signal the importance, the growing importance to this younger age group. And, I think that's interesting because I think we've just seen the discussion of the issue and new products and
Right.
new brands popping up and new materials like exponentially over the last year or so. So that piece I thought was very interesting.
Yeah, it's all like, I think there's two things here too. I think it's for us, it's probably the same for you, Beth, but it's actually really hard to keep up with all the new materials being developed. It's actually amazing how much effort is going into focusing on new material development, and especially sustainable material development that people are working on right now. And then I guess the other part that I would point out is as you say, there's a lot more marketing happening on materials than it has been in the past. So you've got Allbirds talking about their tree runners or wool. You have other traditional brands that are talking a lot more. Like Nike talks about their recycled the ocean waste parlay shoes. That's a lot
Adidas.
more. Adidas, sorry, big mistake.
We're gonna edit that out.
Yeah, but see, it goes to my point. It's hard to keep up with all these different people. I mean, Nike's been doing bottle caps for their shoes and a lot of other things, right? So it's even hard for us to keep up. And I guess this is a good place before we go to number 2 to just plug our Material Summit is occurring in August.
Yep.
It's August 13th. It's the day before the Material Show, the Northwest Material Show. The Northwest Material Show has several hundred material vendors that come show their offerings for actually physical materials. So you have a lot of shoe designers and developers and material teams, sourcing teams go to that and try to find new sustainable products that are being developed. And we're actually trying to bring brands in that are doing sustainable practices like Allbirds to talk about what they're doing, why they're doing it, and how other people can also do it. So it's really important. You can go to ftarea.org under professional development and events to learn more about that. But if you're in footwear and you're designing shoes, developing shoes, material teams are sourcing, you really have to attend this because it's the only summit of its kind focused on kind of these eco-friendly, sustainable materials. And honestly, I learned so much at this. It's not, we're not developing this to develop it. It's actually, we need this just as much as the brands need us to know what's happening.
That's a great point.
All right.
Number 2.
2, willingness to pay more, Beth. Let's talk about this. Yeah. So the question was, how much more would you be willing to pay for eco-friendly, sustainable footwear? What did you find out?
Yeah. So this one's super interesting because, first of all, it took us a while to figure out how to ask this question.
Right.
Because you got to really, design the questions to really guide the respondent into giving you a real honest and, answer that they understand what they're saying. So, at first we're like, okay, maybe we can ask a percentage more, but then thought that might be a little confusing, and a dollar amount was hard. I would pay $5 or $10 more, but that's so hard. If you think about the variation, you can talking about everything from a flip flop to a knee high boot, and the price differential there is so high, so large to begin with. Then that didn't make sense. So we really decided to keep it simple, right, and just get the baseline, like willing to pay more or not, and if yes, then a little or a lot. So first, we saw that about just shy of 40% said they would not pay more. And then 30% said they wouldn't buy eco-friendly, sustainable footwear at all. We've got to have every option for everybody. So we're like, all right, well, we're going to buy you guys.
Okay.
Yeah. We'll try to win them over, at some other time. But of those, so that leaves, a decent chunk that said they would pay a little more. So just over a quarter of respondents said that they would pay a little more.
Okay.
Only 2% said they would pay a lot more. So I think we're looking at that as saying, all right, so consumers probably are not looking, necessarily to, pay a lot more for the benefits of sustainability. They're concerned about it. Maybe they'll pay a little bit more, but not a lot more. But this over-indexed, like most of the questions that we asked, the 18 to 34 age group over-indexed there. So over a third there, so about 37% of the older Gen Z and millennials said they'd pay a little bit more, compared to 27% of, sort of the Gen X and 19% of boomers. So it kind of goes down as you get older.
Well, that's interesting because if you look at that age breakout, in theory, or typically the boomers going to have the most money to spend. And so even though you kind of scratch your head, well, what's a little more? What constitutes a little more? It does skew to the younger generation who, in theory, has less money to spend, but is willing to part with that money in order to obtain some kind of sustainable product.
Yeah, and to that point, what I thought was interesting is that it really, when we looked at the results by income, you could tell it really wasn't about income. The willingness to pay more didn't really have much to do with income. There was little variation, except for the fact that actually those in the 100K plus household income bucket were actually the least likely by just like a few percentage points to say they'd pay a little more. So,
Why don't we do this? Why don't we do a flash? We'll do a flash question. Jasmine, how much more would you be willing to pay for eco-friendly, sustainable footwear since you're in the 18 to 34 age bracket?
And let's say that the shoe is $50. How much more would you be willing to pay if it was sustainable? Like another $5? That's 10% more.
Maybe like another 10.
Like another 10?
Yeah, like if... But also, like, the marketing would have to be with the product at all times. Like, I would have to really know, like, what I'm doing and, like, what this is for. So that would have to, like, match up at all times.
And I think that's a great point, because when I see these numbers, I think of focused marketing, right? If you do a broad-based campaign, you're missing... It seems like more than half the people may not really care yet about sustainable materials. And then you look at the numbers that Beth's talking about that they pulled, and it talks about late Gen Z millennials would pay a little more. And there's your target, right? And I mean, it's like full in. That's where you can make, if you're making the shoe and you're putting more into it and charging more, that's the only group that I would, if I'm a brand, that's the only group I'm focusing my marketing on.
So you're on Insta, you're on Snapchat, that's where you're hanging out with there.
I would leave the boomers alone. I would be like, all right, you'll just buy our basic product or whatever, but maybe later, I'll introduce a few things.
After you're dead.
Small changes can affect attitudes over time. It just takes a long time. And the question is, how patient is the brand to do small adjustments on product to say, you bought this shoe last year, this year we introduced like new sustainable nylon, something like that, right? Or, organic cotton, that's, and then, maybe that slowly creeps in and you can build that in. But I don't think it just speaks to me. They don't expect major change or want major change. They just, they're not interested in that.
Well, it's interesting when we do a survey twice a year on, and I'm sure the NPD's numbers show the same, but just on the willingness to buy shoes online. Yeah. And based on age, you have the same issue with boomers. They're much less likely to purchase shoes online. To your point, Andy, the change factor is prevalent, and Gen Z would rather, their preference is to buy online. And so I think that wave is coming on e-commerce, and that wave will come on sustainability as well.
The question is, and I don't want to get into this a whole lot because I want to get to the next question, which is a really good one. But this is a pontification. If people follow me on LinkedIn, if people follow me on LinkedIn, and you should, because I try to post very interesting things, but I have my own hashtag pontification. So this is a pontification. I'm not sure that online e-commerce is more sustainable than buying in store. Because of all the warehouse issues, the shipping, then you talk about carbon issues, you talk about gas, all those different things. So anyway, I don't want to get into that, but it's counterintuitive that you buy online you might buy a sustainable product online, and I'm not hashing on anybody here. I'm just merely pointing it out. All right.
What are you saying?
Well,
I'm
saying we gotta be
these are honest conversations. We should be honest about it.
Well, it wasn't at the Footwear News CEO Summit in Miami in May. Joey Zwillinger was challenged on that. And he said that, they have set some very, strong goals for themselves, and they meet them in a very, in a number of ways. And they know that, perhaps shipping, direct to every consumer, is a little bit counterintuitive, but they are offsetting that with, some of the other initiatives that they're doing.
That's right.
Carbon tax.
That's right.
On themselves.
They're making an effort. They understand that, and they're being honest about it and trying to get into it. That's a podcast within itself.
Totally.
And we probably don't want to do that. We might make some people mad, but
I think one of the interesting things that they're doing, along with like a brand like Rothy's, is they're working on the packaging, right? So one of the things I've mentioned is like most of the time you're ordering 25% of units of footwear or pairs of footwear being bought online. So most of those are like in two boxes because you've got the shipping box and you've got the shoe box. But Allbirds, Rothy's, they've pushed put those two together. So
Yeah.
there's definitely something there.
Well, since you're talking about the brands, one of the questions you guys was about brand awareness on specific brands doing a lot on sustainability. So let's just jump straight to that one and ask. Your question was, which of the following footwear brands or collections, if any, have you seen or heard about? And you list Allbirds, Veja, Adidas, Parley, Rothy's, Stella McCartney. Is that right? Matt and Nat. None of the above. Now, none of the above is a very famous brand, I know.
Yeah. In fact, someone really should invent a brand with that name, and the awareness would be off the charts.
I just found a brand this weekend, and I did post it on LinkedIn again, folks. You got to get on my LinkedIn and subscribe. But there's a brand called Nothing New. And I thought that was it's a super effective name to tell your way of talking about recycled materials.
That is super
branding
effective.
that way.
That's by that was started by the Thursday Boot people.
Okay.
It's not the same brand name, but it's the same folks.
Very cool. So what did you, on this question, awareness of brands, what did you guys find out? Are they aware? Are they not aware?
Yeah, so kind of not so aware. Again, as we've talked, about the education process, and obviously, we had to come up. We couldn't have a list of 15, 20 brands. I had to keep it tight, so we picked some of the more popular ones right now, some of the newer ones, some ones like brands like Stella McCartney. I mean, Stella McCartney's been making vegan leather bags and footwear. She's done some collaborations with Adidas. Did the vegan Stan Smith.
Right.
And then, Matt and Nat has been around a long time as well, both in the accessory and footwear space. So it's not like they're just jumping on the bandwagon now.
Right.
But, on average, just over a quarter of consumers had heard of any of the brands. But it was higher for the, older Gen Z millennial segment, so it was about 40%. And, for any one brand, the awareness was pretty low. Across the board, again, it was, higher for that younger age group. But, some of it was surprising to me, like Allbirds, 4% awareness. They have 4%. Adidas Parley was at 11%. My guess is that there's some halo effect there because, people are aware of the Adidas
Right.
name. Rothy's was at 5%. Stella McCartney could be some, also halo effect. People know her. She's sort of a celebrity, Paul McCartney's daughter.
Yep.
13%. And then Nat was 3%. But when you parse it down to the younger age group, Adidas Parley had the highest awareness, followed by Stella, and then Allbirds and Matt and Nat were lowest. And like I mentioned before, I mean we are obviously all super aware of Allbirds and Rothy's, but when you bring that out to a broad audience, it's not so much there.
Right.
So
it's a great point because I think oftentimes we're in an insular bubble and we have the curse of knowledge where all we do is talk about this stuff, and we're aware, but it doesn't mean that everybody else out there is aware, and it means that there's actually a huge opportunity for a lot of these brands to keep growing. And
particularly with direct to consumer.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just the barriers have been totally lowered, and you can meet, and that's what Allbirds and Rothy's have done.
Right.
Have shown how strong direct to consumer can be.
And I guess the other part of this thing that you keep coming back to is the numbers. And you talked about one of the top level conclusions of this, but the consumers aged 18 to 34, they seem very aware. They seem very engaged. They seem willing to spend more. It just seems to me like if you're a brand and you're targeting product, you should put the majority of your effort into that age group and slowly introduce things to other age groups and not ignore it. But if you try a broad campaign, you're just wasting your money. In essence, right. I don't know. What do you think about that, Beth?
Well, I think that's a good point. But actually, when we get into one of the other questions we asked about, kind of key sustainability issues, there are some things that over-index for the older consumers. So those were water conservation and energy conservation. So it wasn't necessarily animal welfare or waste reduction, but it was more about the water and the energy, which is very interesting because, I mean, obviously this is a sample of one and it's just an anecdote, but like I see, my parents are very hyper aware of like water these days, and like they don't run the dishwasher really anymore. 'Cause, they're it's just the two of us at home. We can wash off our dishes, and obviously, if they have people over and it gets full, they'll run it. But when I was younger, they never talked about that kind of stuff. So
Right.
it's interesting the things that are resonating with them versus what are resonating with the younger consumers.
That's interesting too, because on here I'm looking at it, and let's see, about 1/5 of consumers noted animal welfare and waste reduction as the most important issues, which is very interesting. But I think the thing is too, when I was coming up in the 80s, there was a huge push on recyclability. That was a huge issue at the time, and cutting off your lights.
Yeah.
There was a whole thing around that. I don't know where it went.
That was just your dad trying to save a buck on
well,
the
thing is,
electric
my
bill.
my wife's.
Who left this light on?
What are you doing? You're killing our budget. But my wife's a little bit younger than I am, and she leaves the lights on and doesn't. I'm not saying that she doesn't care. I'm just saying that there's just an awareness, and maybe it's.
Now, Andy's, why'd you leave this light on?
That's exactly right. I am.
Yeah.
But I think that's like household culture too. Like it's like whatever your parents were really
That's true.
like strictly enforced, and I feel like you kind of just carried it on in the rest of your life.
Yeah. So I don't know.
Or opposite, or the opposite.
Right,
You're like,
yeah.
I'm leaving the lights on now that I
'cause
live
you
on my
can.
own.
That's exactly right. You're rebelling.
Awesome. So I think as we kind of before we pivot to Jasmine for her famous fashion, footwear, and focus segment, I would like to point out that this data is going to be available. NPD is working with us, and we've created a website, shoesustainability.com, shoesustainability.com, and you can visit that site. And the NPD Group will put up information on that from the survey, and you can click on that and go directly to their website and see the full data stats on that. There'll be other resources on there as well. We'll post up our industry data as soon as we finish analyzing it and doing that, but that'll be a great resource. So Beth, thanks for you guys asking the consumers these questions, helping us get some insight. Brands need to know where they need to focus effort, and obviously there's an opportunity to market more on this stuff and to different audiences. And there seems to be a lot of opportunity. So
I kid you not. I just got an email at 10:31. This is supposed to be evergreen. 10:31 a.m. in July of 2019 from Reebok. Cotton and corn's back, baby. Made with things that grow. Made for a better future. New looks available now.
Is that the new brand called Maze?
It
Is it amazing?
It is amazing.
Whoop, whoop. All right. Before we get too corny, Jasmine, please save me from all my terrible puns.
Okay, so I've been looking at some of the like fashion for this like summer of 2019 since we're already like aging this podcast. So on Harper's Bazaar, some of the things that stood out to me was like the sporty like Teva sandal. I see like a lot of other brands are incorporating that style in their collections, and I haven't seen it before. Like usually like the slides are really popular, but now you see more of like the sporty fashion flatform sandals, and that's like something I don't own, but I totally should.
Totally.
I feel like Matt you have a pair like are somewhat like Teva like sporty sandal, but I'm not sure.
I do.
Like,
I've got a number of different types of sandals. I've got Keen sandals.
Yeah, those are sporty sandals.
I got Birkenstocks, not sporty.
Yeah.
I got Jerusalem sandals from Made in Israel,
Yes.
not sporty. Those are more classics.
Yeah.
And I don't have any Tevas.
Oh, okay. Well, you should get some too then. I feel like they're totally in. I feel like I like people dress them up and dress them down. So I think it's like a good fashion moment. Beth, do you have sporty sandals? What are you wearing for the summertime?
Well, it's very funny because I actually just got a pair. I don't know if I should say which
fun.
brand
Okay.
because, client versus, client,
Yeah, right.
the one but it's funny because it was sort of drawing the line between, like, they're cool and I'm not sure I can pull them off, or they're just like really ugly, you know? So it's very interesting. To me,
That's
it's fascinating.
the line to be
This is
on
common
nowadays.
sense. Yeah, exactly. I mean, these things are being sold in like Urban Outfitters
Yep.
as well as, sporting goods stores. And you're like, all right, which one am I, and can I pull it off?
Yeah.
But it's really become a huge trend. The comfort element, the versatility, it's fascinating to me that these brands, these products that have been around forever and considered kind of ugly now, like the designer brands are emulating them.
Right.
That whole thing with like Keen and Gucci was really funny.
That was funny.
Yeah, I think this is a great trend. I love it.
Yeah, okay, so that's great. I feel like we all approve of that, of the sporty fashion sandals. So I definitely will be getting a pair.
Chacos. Have you seen Chacos? They're a Wolverine brand. Like,
Oh, okay,
they're
I gotta
cool.
look.
They're
Okay.
another cool sporty sandal that you should wear. And people show on
Yeah.
social media their Chaco tans from their feet
Oh, wow.
getting tanned and burning
okay,
the
yeah.
lines
Yeah.
that
I
form
don't
on
really
your
have that
feet.
problem. Okay.
And they actually just came out, so maybe now I'm giving myself away, but they have now a closed toe. It's called the Odyssey, and it's a combination of their kind of Z-strap, but it's a little bit more closed. You could hike in it. You could get, if you're in the water, it's fine.
Yeah.
You can run around the city in it. So, and this is, again, it goes, across the spectrum. So
Yeah,
like,
and they're
it's
sold at
so-
Urban Outfitters too, which is interesting. I'm looking
Yeah,
at mine
exactly.
now.
Yep.
Sweet.
Wow.
I
Okay,
think
cool.
I think there's an opportunity there for Chacos to have a crossover. I mean, Wolverine's done a crossover with Dunkin', so why wouldn't they do one with Taco Bell? Chacos and tacos, baby. Blake Krieger, are you listening? I hope you are, man. That's my $1 million idea for you. You're welcome. Chacos and tacos, people. Now that's sustainability.
They do. They have a taco truck at they do have some sort of like a taco truck at the festival.
Boom.
So they have them, but
There you
they
go.
have a specific product,
Very interesting.
That's funny.
Beth, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing the data and insights that you guys have. And if people want to learn more, what's the URL for NPD Group?
NPD.com.
There you go. Very simple. Are you guys going to continue to ask sustainability questions and surveys in the future?
Yeah, we will. We put survey questions. I mean, we have our regular survey
Right.
questions that we're asking to understand the market and tracking sales
Right,
and everything.
right,
but we put topical survey questions out there, every once in a while. So we'll make sure this stays like in the rotation.
Perfect.
And then I'm also looking forward to the sourcing summit at the end of the
Yes.
month.
Thank
We'll
you
be
for
talking
the
about it more
plug.
there.
The Sourcing and Sustainability Summit at the end of July. Folks can learn more at fda.org on that. And Beth will be on my panel on sustainability, where I think the panel's discussion is honest conversations on sustainability, where we really dig in and we trash all these people that are not doing the right thing. Right, Beth?
Name and shame, baby.
She's like,
Name
no,
and
actually, I'm
shame."
not doing that.
Those are all her clients.
This is why I had the muzzle clause in our contract.
Violated over and over and over again.
Oh, Beth, thanks for being a good sport about this.
Yeah, no, it was great. It was a lot of fun.
Awesome. And thanks for collaborating with us on all things sustainability. Folks,
Yeah, great
this is Shoe and Show. You can catch us on Facebook, Twitter. We're at shoeandshow.com. You can see our full catalog. There's almost, 175 shows at this point, somewhere around that. We've got a full catalog of everything, and we cover everything in the footwear business. So if you love shoes, we help peel back the onion and show the ins and outs of all things footwear. If you would like to be a guest, let us know. We're happy to have you on. Or if there's other topical ideas that you would like to hear about, let us know that too. And definitely subscribe to get the latest shoe in on any of the podcasts that you listen to, any of the software podcasts from Google to iTunes, etc. You can get it in your inbox every Monday morning at like 12:05 a.m. With that, for Matt, Jasmine, myself, our producer Blake, and Beth Goldstein from the NPD Group, thank you very much for listening. And until next time, Shoein is out.
Shoein has been brought to you by the FDRA, the Footwear Industries Association focused on retail, trade, politics, and fashion, helping create and enhance conversations on all things footwear. For information about FDRA, visit fdra.org.